Hello, and welcome to Introduction to Psychology. This presentation continues our look at the topic of human development. The presentation will address two questions. The first being, what are the stages of cognitive development? Cognitive development is the development of mental abilities such as judgment, reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. The most influential figure in the field of cognitive development was a Swiss scientist called Jean Piaget. Piaget developed a comprehensive theory of how children's understanding of the world changes as they mature. His theory does two things. Firstly, it explains how children's knowledge becomes more advanced, how they learn new information. And secondly, it explains how children's thinking skills become more advanced. Piaget's theory holds that children construct knowledge, they build upon prior experience, via the adaptation process. The theory holds that children are born with simple schemata, and that these schemata get more numerous and more complex as they get older. Schemata are theories or beliefs about objects, people, and events. These theories can be about our own actions, for example, believing that we can grip things or move things. They can be about things in the world around us, for example, believing that cars have four wheels, a steering wheel, and an engine. Or even about abstract notions, for example, believing that socialism is a political system in which the means of production are owned by everyone. Schemata become more numerous and more complex via two sub-processes. One sub-process is assimilation. Children form schema based on their experiences. Schema are bodies of knowledge about concepts. For example, as a result of seeing a picture of a cat's head, a child might form the belief that cats have pointy ears, whiskers, and fur. When a child encounters new information that is consistent with an existing schema, then that information is assimilated into, gets added to, the schema. For example, if a child has an existing schema that cats have pointy ears, whiskers, and fur, and then sees a full body photo of cats for the first time, then this new experience is consistent with the schema. The animals do have pointy ears, whiskers, and fur. So the new information, that cats also have four legs and a tail, gets added to the schema. Thus, the schema gets more complex. Another sub-process is accommodation. When a child encounters new information that is inconsistent with an existing schema, then that schema is revised, or a new schema is created in order to accommodate that information. For example, if a child has an existing schema that cats have pointy ears, whiskers, fur, four legs, and a tail, and then sees a Peter-bald cat for the first time, then this new experience is inconsistent with their schema. Peter-bald cats do not have fur. So the schema has to be revised and a new schema created in order to accommodate the new information that some cats do not have fur. Piaget's theory also looks at thinking advancement. According to the theory, children's thinking becomes more advanced in distinct stages. By looking at the pattern of children's performance on intelligence test questions, by looking at the types of questions that they got right and the types of questions that they got wrong, Piaget deduced that children become capable of different types of thought at roughly fixed ages. He then devised numerous experiments to test his ideas. We now know that children become capable of different types of thought at roughly fixed ages due to brain maturation. That is, different structures in the brain mature at different rates. Some structures are fully functioning at birth, but most develop as the child gets older. For example, brain regions responsible for the senses and motor control are highly developed at birth. Language centers develop from about 18 months onwards. Working memory centers advance from about 7 years onwards. And the prefrontal cortex, which is important for abstract reasoning, advances from adolescence through to about 25 years. Accordingly, children don't get gradually better and better at thinking. Instead, they become capable of different types of thinking once their level of brain development is sufficient to support that type of thinking. Piaget's model lays out 4 types of thinking and the typical ages at which children's brains become capable of supporting that type of thinking. The first stage in Piaget's theory is the sensory motor stage. The sensory motor stage lasts from birth to approximately 2 years of age. In the sensory motor stage, children have very basic thinking abilities. It is only the sensory and motor regions of the brain that are adequately developed. So children in this stage are only capable of sensing things and controlling their movements, controlling their own movements. Hence, they can only accomplish very simple IQ tasks like tracking objects, following them with their eyes, or grasping objects, holding them in their hands. The second stage in Piaget's theory is the pre-operational stage. The pre-operational stage lasts from approximately 2 to 7 years of age. It is not until about 2 years of age that children's brains become sufficiently developed to allow them to depict objects in their minds, either as pictures, mental images, or as words, symbolic representations. This gives them a sense of object permanence. That is, they realize that objects still exist even when they can't currently see, hear, or touch them, because they can depict the objects in their heads. This enables children to accomplish slightly more difficult IQ tasks, such as searching for objects, naming objects, and answering questions about objects, such as how big is a cup, or what is a cup used for. Despite this major advance, children in this stage still have no ability to think logically. There are many ways in which pre-operational children show failures in logic. Egocentrism is the inability to visualize the world from another person's perspective. For example, pre-operational children believe that other people see what they can see. Centering is focusing on just one salient aspect of a situation while ignoring other relevant details. For example, when asked to consider the quantity of liquid in 2 containers, a pre-operational child might base their judgments on the container lengths, but ignore their widths. Failure to conserve is believing that things change in quantity when they change in shape. For example, a pre-operational child might believe that there is less paper when a sheet gets crumpled into a ball. The third stage in Piaget's theory is the concrete operational stage. The concrete operational stage lasts from about 7 to 11 years of age. It is not until about 7 years of age that children's brains become sufficiently developed to allow them to start thinking logically. Initially, they can only think logically about things that are currently in sight or touchable. This allows them to accomplish IQ tasks such as classification, physically grouping objects together based on similarity, or seriation, physically ordering things in a sequence. Although children in the concrete operational stage can apply logical thought to visible or touchable things, they are not capable of thinking logically about things that they cannot currently see or touch. It should be noted that in the terminology of Piaget's theory, an operation is a logical thought. The final stage in Piaget's theory is the formal operational stage. The formal operational stage begins at about 11 years of age. By about 11 years of age, the brain becomes sufficiently developed to allow children to start thinking logically about things even when they are not in sight or touchable. The prefrontal cortex, which is important for deductive reasoning, experiences a second growth spurt during adolescence. As a consequence, children's brains become sufficiently developed to support the full range of human thinking skills. For example, they can accomplish IQ tasks requiring deductive reasoning and creativity. It should be noted, however, that not everyone fully acquires the ability to apply logical thought to abstract situations. People vary in their hypothetical and deductive reasoning skills depending on their intelligence, how developed their brains have become, and how much instruction they receive. In fact, 40% of college students fail some formal operational tasks, such as deductive reasoning tasks. The second question that this presentation will address is, what are the principles of attachment theory? Attachments are deep and enduring emotional bonds that connect one individual to another. For example, ties to family, friends, or romantic partners. Primary attachments are attachments that are formed between infants and their caregivers. That is, the attachment formed between an infant and the person or persons most responsible for them in their first 7 months of life. This is typically the infant's mother or father, but could be a grandparent or a sibling, depending on family circumstances. As we have said, primary attachments are attachments that are formed by infants to their caregivers. According to evolutionary theory, animals are genetically programmed with mechanisms enabling them to form primary attachments because primary attachments aid survival. Having a caregiver close by increases the chances of survival. In nidiphygious birds that leave the nest shortly after hatching, these innate mechanisms are imprinting, automatically accepting the first moving object seen as the caregiver, and instinctive following, automatically following that caregiver around. In humans, the innate mechanism is engaging in social release behaviors. That is, doing things like smiling, crying, or crawling that help ensure proximity to the caregiver. For example, an infant might cry in order to attract her caregiver, or smile in order to ensure the continued attention of their caregiver. Mammals form primary attachments to those who provide tactile comfort and sensitive responding. The people responsible for this finding were Harry and Margaret Harlow. Harry and Margaret Harlow bred monkeys at Wisconsin University for their learning studies. To equalize experiences and to isolate them from disease, they separated infant monkeys from their mothers at birth and put them into individual cages lined with a cheesecloth baby blanket. When they removed these blankets to be washed, they noticed that the monkeys became very distressed. The Harlows realized that the monkeys had formed attachments to their blankets because the blankets provided comfort. Hence, the monkeys became distressed when the blankets were removed. This showed the importance that physical comforting plays in forming primary attachments. The Harlows then demonstrated that tactile comfort is more important than feeding in forming attachments. They did this by presenting the monkeys with two artificial mothers, one that provided food and one that provided comfort, as shown in the photo. The monkeys consistently preferred to stay close to the mother that provided tactile comfort. Primary attachment in humans is built on sensitive responding. That is, on the caregiver interpreting the baby's signals correctly and responding to these signals promptly and appropriately. For example, correctly interpreting that an infant's crying means that it is wet and responding quickly by changing its diaper. Sensitive responding includes providing tactile comfort when required. Consistency of parenting determines an infant's attachment style. That is, the infant's level of confidence in how available care and comfort will be. If the infant's primary caregiver, PCG, is consistently attentive and caring, then the infant develops the secure attachment style. That is, the infant feels confident that attachment figures will be available, responsive, and helpful. If the PCG is consistently inattentive and uncaring, then the infant develops the avoidant attachment style. That is, the infant has no confidence that attachment figures will be available, responsive, or helpful. If the PCG is inconsistent, sometimes attentive and caring, and sometimes not, then the infant develops the anxious attachment style. That is, the infant feels uncertain whether attachment figures will be available, responsive, and helpful. Infant attachment styles can be identified using the strange situation test. The strange situation test involves a child and their primary caregiver going into a room. A stranger then enters the room and the primary caregiver leaves. After a short period, the primary caregiver returns. The infant is observed during the procedure to see how they react when the PCG leaves and returns. Securely attached infants feel confident that attachment figures will be available, responsive, and helpful. Thus, they show upset at separation, but actively seek out the PCG on return and are easily comforted. Avoidantly attached infants have no confidence that attachment figures will be available, responsive, and helpful. Thus, they don't show any upset at separation and don't seek out the PCG on their return. Instead, they tend to turn their attention to other things, such as playing with toys. Anxiously attached infants feel uncertain whether attachment figures will be available, responsive, and helpful. Thus, they tend to be generally very clingy and ill at ease before separation and are very upset at separation, and then are very difficult to soothe upon reunion. According to research carried out by John Bowlby, inadequate primary attachment can have serious, irreversible developmental consequences. In 1944, John Bowlby published a study comparing 44 juvenile delinquents, thieves, with 44 non-offenders. He discovered that the majority of delinquents had been separated from their mothers for at least 6 months during their first 5 years of life, whereas only 2 of the non-offenders had. This led Bowlby to conclude that inadequate primary attachment can have serious, irreversible developmental consequences. He argued that the reason for this was that having a secure attachment gives infants the confidence to explore relationships with others, safe in the knowledge that if things go wrong, they have an attachment figure to return to. He argued that it is the forging of relationships with others that facilitates the learning of empathy and trust, feelings that the juvenile delinquents lacked. Thus, they were more likely to commit crime and be aggressive, and less likely to show affection. According to research, primary attachment styles set the template for adult attachment styles. If your early attachment experiences gave you high confidence that others will be there for you when you need them, then you find it easy to get close to others and feel comfortable depending on them. If your early attachment experiences gave you low confidence that care and comfort will be forthcoming, then you find it difficult to forge relationships, and it is hard for you to trust and depend on others. If your early attachments experiences left you unsure of whether care and comfort will be forthcoming, then you tend to worry a lot about relationships. For example, you might worry that your partner will leave you, so you constantly need reassurance. Also, according to research, adult attachment styles influence how we interact with our romantic partners. Fraley and Shaver interviewed and observed couples in an airport. They identified individuals' attachment styles and found that their behaviors were consistent with these styles. For example, anxious attachment styles individuals showed far more distress when they became separated from their partners in the airport than other attachment styles individuals did. And avoidant attachment styles individuals sought much less contact with their partners in the airport than other attachment styles did.